Welcome to the adventures of the monad. To clairvoyant sight, one of the principal features of an emotional body consists of the colors which are constantly playing through it. These colors correspond to and are expressions in emotional matter of feelings, passions, and emotions. All known colors, and many which at present are unknown to us, exist upon each of the higher planes of nature. As we rise from one stage to another, they become more delicate and more luminous, so that they may be described as higher octaves of colors. As it is not possible to portray these octaves physically on paper, the facts just stated should be borne in mind when considering the colored illustrations of the emotional body presented here. The following is a description of the principal colors and the emotions by which they are expressed. Black. In thick clouds, hatred and malice. Red. Deep red flashes usually on a black background. Anger. A scarlet cloud. Irritability. Brilliant scarlet on the ordinary background of the aura. Noble indignation. Lurid red, unmistakable though not easy to describe, sensuality. Brown gray, dull hard brown gray, selfishness, one of the commonest colors in the emotional body. Brown red, dull, almost rust colored, avarice, usually arranged in parallel bars across the emotional body. Greenish brown, lit up by deep red or scarlet flashes, jealousy. In the case of an ordinary person, there is usually much of this color present when they are in love. Gray, heavy laden, depression. Like the brown red of avarice, arranged in parallel lines, conveying the impression of a cage. Gray, livid. A hideous and frightful hue, fear. Crimson, dull and heavy, selfish love. Rose-colored, unselfish love, when exceptionally brilliant, tinged with lilac, spiritual love for humanity. Orange, pride or ambition, often found with irritability. Yellow, intellect, varies from deep and dull tint through brilliant gold to clear and luminous lemon or primrose yellow. Dull yellow, ochre, implies the direction of faculty to selfish purposes. Clear yellowish pigments indicate a distinctly higher type. Primrose yellow denotes intellect devoted to spiritual ends. Gold indicates pure intellect applied to philosophy or mathematics. Green, in general, varies greatly in its significance and needs study to be interpreted correctly. Mostly, it indicates adaptability. Gray-green, slimy in appearance, deceit and cunning. Emerald green, versatility, ingenuity and resourcefulness, applied unselfishly. Pale, luminous blue-green, deep sympathy and compassion, with the power of perfect adaptability, which only they can have. Bright apple green seems always to accompany strong vitality. Blue, dark and clear, religious feeling. It is liable to be tinted by many other qualities, thus becoming any shade from indigo or a deep rich violet to muddy gray blue. Light blue, such as ultramarine or cobalt, is devotion to a noble spiritual ideal. A tint of violet indicates a mixture of affection and devotion. Luminous lilac, usually accompanied by sparkling golden stars, represents higher spirituality with lofty spiritual aspirations. Ultraviolet, higher and purer developments of psychic faculties. Ultra-red, lower psychic faculties of one who dabbles in evil and selfish forms of magic. That is a lot to take in one go. But if you could see an emotional aura, you would be able to relate colors to emotions. In such a manner, you would be able to read a person like a book. Joy shows itself in a general brightening and radiancy of both mental and emotional bodies, and a peculiar rippling of the surface of the body. Cheerfulness shows itself as a modified bubbling form of this, and also in a steady serenity. Surprise shows up as a sharp constriction of the mental body, usually communicated to both the emotional and physical bodies, accompanied by an increased glow of a band of affection if the surprise is a pleasant one, and by an increase of brown and gray if the surprise is an unpleasant one. The constriction often causes unpleasant feelings affecting the solar plexus, resulting in sickness and sometimes the heart center, causing palpitations and even death. It should be understood that as human emotions are hardly ever unmixed, these colors are seldom perfectly pure, but more usually mixtures. Thus, the purity of many colors is dimmed by the hard brown-gray of selfishness or tinged with the deep orange of pride. In reading the full meaning of colors, other points have also to be taken into consideration. For example, the general brilliance of the emotional body, the comparative definition of or undefined nature of its outline, and the relative brightness of the different centers of force, those being the chakras. The yellow of intellect, the rose of affection, and the blue of devotion are always found in the upper part of the emotional body. The colors of selfishness, avarice, deceit, and hatred are in the lower parts. The mass of sensual feelings float usually in between the two. From this, it follows that in the undeveloped person, the lower portion of the ovoid tends to be larger than the upper, so that the emotional body has the appearance of an egg with the small end uppermost. In the more developed person, the reverse is the case, with the small end of the egg pointing downwards. The tendency is always for the symmetry of the ovoid to reassert itself by degrees, so that such appearances are only temporary. Each quality expressed as a color has its special type of emotional matter, and the average position of these colors depends upon the specific gravity of the respective grades of matter. The general principle is that evil or selfish qualities express themselves in the comparatively slow vibrations of coarser matter, while good and unselfish qualities play through finer matter. This being the case, fortunately for us, good emotions persist even longer than evil ones, the effect of a feeling of strong love or a devotion remaining in the emotional body long after the occasion that caused it has been forgotten. It is possible, though unusual, to have two rates of vibrations going on strongly in the emotional body at the same time. For example, love and anger. The after effect will go on side by side, but one at a very much higher level than the other and therefore persisting longer. High unselfish affection and devotion belong to the highest molecular emotional subplane, 48.2, and these reflect themselves in the corresponding matter of the mental plane. They thus touch the causal, higher mental body, not the lower mental. This is an important point of which we should take special note. The monad focused in the causal envelope between incarnations is only affected by unselfish thoughts. These effects are only registered when the monad is at least subjectively conscious in its causal envelope. This occurs after the I2 is taken, when the focus relocates from the 48.1 permanent atom to the 47.4 permanent molecule. Lower thoughts are retained within the permanent molecule 47.4. Consequently, in the causal body, there would be a gap, not bad colors, corresponding to the lower feelings and thoughts. Selfishness, for example, would show itself as an absence of affection or sympathy. As soon as selfishness is replaced by its opposite, the gap in the causal body would be filled up. An intensification of the coarse colors of the emotional body, representing base emotions, whilst finding no direct expression in the causal body, nevertheless tends somewhat to dim the luminosity of the colors representing the opposite virtues in the causal body. To realize the appearance of the emotional body, it must be borne in mind that the particles of which it is composed are always in rapid motion. In the vast majority of cases, the clouds of color melt into one another and are all the while rolling over one another, appearing and disappearing as they roll, the surface of the luminous mist resembling the surface of violently boiling water. The various colors, therefore, don't retain the same positions, though there is a normal position towards which they tend to return. Referring to the book Man, Visible and Invisible by Charles Ledbetter, humanity can be roughly divided into three categories: the undeveloped person, the average person, and the developed person. The characteristics of their emotional bodies may be delineated as follows. The undeveloped type. A very large proportion of sensuality, deceit, selfishness, and greed are conspicuous. Fierce anger is implied by smears and blots of dull scarlet. Very little affection appears, and such intellect and religious feelings that exist are of the lowest possible kind. The outline is irregular, and the colors are blurred, thick, and heavy. The whole body is ill-regulated, confused, and uncontrolled. The average type. Sensuality appears much less, though is still prominent. Selfishness is also prominent, and there is some capability of deceit for personal ends, though the green is beginning to divide into two distinct qualities, showing that cunning is gradually becoming adaptable. Anger is still marked. Affection, intellect, and devotion are more prominent and of a higher quality. The colors as a whole are more clearly defined and distinctly brighter, though none of them are perfectly clear. The outline of the body is more defined and regular. The developed type. Undesirable qualities have almost entirely disappeared. Across the top of the body there is a strip of lilac indicating spiritual aspiration. Above and enveloping the head there is a cloud of brilliant yellow of intellect. Below that there is a broad belt of blue devotion. Then across the trunk there is a wider belt of the rose of affection. And in the lower portion of the body a large amount of green of adaptability and sympathy finds its place. The colors are bright and luminous in clearly marked bands, and the outline is well defined, and the whole emotional body conveys the impression of being orderly and under perfect control. Although examining the mental body at present, it should be mentioned that, as a person develops, their emotional body begins to resemble their mental body, until it becomes little more than a reflection of it in the grosser matter of the emotional plane. This, of course, indicates that the person has their desires thoroughly under the control of the mind and is no longer apt to be swept away by surges of emotions. Such a person will no doubt be subject to occasional irritability and undesirable cravings of various sorts, for instance chocolate. But they know enough now to repress these lower manifestations and not to yield to them. At a still higher stage, the mental body itself becomes a reflection of the causal body, since the person now learns to follow solely the promptings of what is called the higher self, which in our case is the urgings of our solar diva. Now we are guided almost exclusively by them, or at least should be. The mental envelope and the emotional envelope of the Arhat 46 self would have very little characteristic colors of its own. There would be no elemental matter in these envelopes. Elementals stop at the causal level. To view the mental and emotional envelopes of an Arhat would be to see a reproduction of the causal matter, as much as the lower envelopes could express it. The colors would have an iridescence, a sort of opalescent mother-of-pearl effect, which is far beyond either description or representation. But here is an attempt anyway. On that uplifting note, let's leave it there for today and finish off our look at the topic of colors found in our envelopes of incarnation with special reference to our emotional body. Thank you.